Welcome into the DNVR Rockies podcast presented by Strava Craft Coffee. Remember to use that promo code DNVR20 because when you do, well, you get 20% off your entire purchase of that CBD infused, deliciously rich and potentially life-altering Strava Craft Coffee. I'm your host, Drew Creasman. I'm the managing editor of DNVR Rockies. With me, as always, is beat writer Patrick Lyons. And on this episode, we're talking about all kinds of stuff having to do with the players, the owners, the CBA, the new rules, you know, the good stuff you really want to hear about. There's actually a lot. Sometimes that kind of talk can be a little bit boring, I will admit, but not on this episode, not with everything that's going on right now in this world. A lot to be haggled over right now. But before we get into all that, Patrick, there were a couple little things in Rocky Land over the last couple of days that happened that we've mentioned but not really talked about. So I did just want to touch very quickly on the Greg Bird and Tony Wolter stuff. I know we talked about it yesterday. I do think the Greg Bird thing is a very nice story with him getting to come home to Colorado. We'll see if he ends up making the team, but something that I didn't want to do with our guest yesterday when we, didn't quite have the time was dive into a little bit of the numbers. And you had talked about it, how his rookie year out there in New York, he had a pretty solid season. There was a lot of promise. Guy hit 11 home runs in 178 plate appearances over 46 games. Has never really been able to come close to matching the production in terms of, getting on base that year at a 343 clip, but he did hit 11 home runs again in 2018 in 82 games. So there is definite pop in that bat. You mentioned a possible platoon with him being the big 6'4" lefty. He's still 28 years old. So, there's some interest there. And then with Josh Fuentes obviously being the other side of that, I think it's a nice story. There's no such thing as a bad minor league contract for a guy who's shown an ability to hit some pretty big home run numbers in short time. Strikes out a lot and does the other things, but the home runs are there, and it's something you can dream on maybe a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, when healthy, I mean, he's been productive. Again, might strike out more than you would like. I think his 2018 season was somewhat promising. If you look at the batting average, if you look at the batting average, don't.
Actually,
do not look at his batting average.
Don't look at the batting average.
No. Look at those power numbers. Definitely are something promising, especially when you're looking at Josh Fuentes over at first base, who is more contact based than power based. And consider too, if the projected lineup, who do you have on the Rockies bench? And again, we know they're not going to necessarily contend, but they're not throwing the games away. They want to win those games. And Bud Black wants to push all the right buttons to squeeze a couple more wins here and there, and maybe you get lucky and something good happens. That being said, after Ian Desmond off the bench, what are your other options? Who's your big, left-handed bat coming off the bench? Because all your best left-handed bats are already in the lineup. So
if
Greg Bird
Hilliard's
could be that guy.
Yeah.
So similar story to David Dahl as far as, being injured and having it not get locked in, but maybe just as good of a story, if not better. That again, Grandview High School right there in Aurora. He's coming back home first. Colorado position player with the Rockies in some time. I can't think off the top of my head. Obviously, you got Kyle Freeland here already, and Colorado's been churning out a lot of really good ball players in the last decade or so, and it's nice to see another one added to the roster to join Kyle Freeland.
Was out the pitcher that they just drafted? I've already forgotten his name.
Oh, Case Williams. Yeah, he's gone. He's off. We got Max.
You got to have a certain number of Colorado kids. You got to have a certain number of Drews. That's always been a thing. You've got to have a Drew in the system, and it's up in the air whether or not Butera comes back. Add Stubbs and Pomeranz. Obviously, Goodman. I think as long as Goodman's around, then you've got yourself Drews in the organization.
Well, I wanted them to go, a little bit harder on the starting pitching. I mean, I know they got Chris McMahon in the draft at the beginning of the second round, but I ultimately the reason why they picked a prep catcher was because his name was Drew Romo. So I think now we understand a little bit more why they reached in a sense for Drew
Makes sense.
Romo. But they're
Butera's
good.
gone. Butera's gone. Confirmed. There's no way Butera's coming back. You just solved that mystery there.
He would have, but then
Oh my God.
then you got to
It all
take somebody
works.
else in that compensation round. It's a whole thing.
One Drew on the field at a time. Love it. All right. The other thing, as I mentioned, Tony Walters, the stash that runs the plash. That one never quite got on. Debate about how many bags he was allowed to have. Signs with Pittsburgh, so out of the fire and into the fire. But hey, he's still got a job in Major League Baseball, so we're still happy for Tony Walters.
Yeah, I have an idea as to what it might mean, but you never know. Yeah, going from the Rockies to the Pirates, it's kind of like Pat Valaika going from the Rockies to the Orioles. Sam Howard was a guy who was with Pittsburgh last year. Again, Rockies, Pittsburgh connection. These things tend to happen. We haven't had the Tigers Rockies connection just yet. Although you were pining a little bit for CJ Cron there for a while, so that would have kind of added up. But we wish nothing but Tony but the best. It kind of almost seems as if there was an unknown trade between Elias Diaz and Tony Walters. They were obviously together on the Rockies in 2020, but now they have officially swapped spots. And I think Walters has a fairly solid opportunity there in Pittsburgh to stick around. I think the other options there, Luke Maile, Michael Perez, who was picked up from Tampa Bay. They also have Andrew Suarez. So they basically have 4 number 3 catchers there. And it'll really just be about, who can, produce the most, who can handle the pitching the best. I think Tony probably is a favorite in that sense in Pittsburgh. So we wish him nothing but the best. And we hope that, he does stick in there and maybe make for some interesting Pirates Cardinals matchups when you've got, Nolan behind the plate, Arenado in the batter's box, maybe Sam Howard's on the bump. It could be interesting to see how all that shakes out in the NL Central, and there could be a couple other guys doing that too. I know we mentioned Jake McGee did sign with San Francisco. He ended up getting a 2-year pact with the Giants, and we could see some other moves as we have touched on so far this offseason. The Rockies have done a really solid job in bolstering that bullpen. They've gotten some praise nationally too. Again, might not be a top 10 bullpen, but certainly could be, a top 15. And, with there being somewhat of a numbers crunch and not as many young guys in that bullpen that have options, there could be a player or two on the chopping block, especially if Jordan Sheffield makes himself known as their Rule 5 pick. You can only give those guys back. It's hard to bring them, slip them through waivers and bring them back to AAA. So Jordan Sheffield's going to get an opportunity. He's going to knock a guy off that 26-man roster. Tyler Kinley has options to go down, but he's 30 years old and, was pretty impressive outside of, 2 outings last year that really jacked up his ERA in a major way, which was the case for a lot of relievers last year with the shortened 60-game season. So, if any of the other guys like Derek Rodriguez, if they decide to go with a 6-man rotation, he's in play. Brian Gonzalez was another guy that was a non-roster invite. And we could even see a few other guys get added this offseason as a non-roster spot because, there are less teams in the minor leagues right now. And there are less spots and less opportunities for guys to continue their playing career. And as much as we've already discussed this idea that, any self-respecting pitcher, starting, relieving, or otherwise, may not want to sign with Colorado because of the damage it could do to their ERA. Well, you know what? Hey, when you're down to playing independent baseball or hanging up your cleats altogether, if Colorado gives you a non-roster opportunity, you're going to take that. And, if things go really well, boom, you're back in business. We saw it with Daniel Bard. To a degree, we didn't necessarily know what to expect, but he was a guy that if he hung it up after getting invited to Rockies camp, you would have thought nothing of it because you go, yeah, well, 34, 35 years old, hasn't pitched in the majors in quite some time. makes sense that his career would have ended at that point. So we'll still wait to see what happens. The Rockies even made a couple moves in the last few weeks to acquire 2 outfielders for their system. Nick Longy, 25-year-old guy who I believe he was drafted by Boston originally. Spent some time with Cincinnati in their Double-A. Didn't do anything last year, of course. But he'll be a guy that'll battle for some playing time in AAA with Albuquerque. So we should see him a little bit this spring training. Wynton Bernard, I believe his name is Wynton Bernard, 30 years old, a little bit older. So, not as much projectability, but is a guy who has stolen 40 plus bases in the minor leagues during his time. Again, he's going to round out the Isotopes roster because, the Rockies system is a little thin on the higher levels of the system. I think they've got a little bit more pitching depth in Double-A and Triple-A right now than they do offensively with their hitters. It might sound a little bit strange, but Vince Fernandez was a guy that was taken in the Rule 5 draft in the minor league phase. He's with San Francisco. We did see, as Drew mentioned earlier, in that Case Williams trade. It would be great if it did turn out to be the Case Williams trade. Actually, it wouldn't for the Rockies. If it's known as the Case Williams trade, then that's bad. That's bad. You have a high school kid right down the street in Castle Rock. You trade him to the Cincinnati Reds, who, have had an eye on him, and he ends up being the best player out of the deal. That would be bad. As of right now, it's just the Jeff Hoffman, Robert Stevenson deal. We'll see what happens with that. But in that trade, 2 for 2, the Rockies did acquire Jameson Hannah, who sits somewhere in the low teens for the Rockies. Again, not sure, he's probably more of a 4th outfield type for Colorado. So he'll be another depth piece. The starting outfield for Albuquerque might not be that exciting. We might see Jonathan Dazza. He could start the season there again, depending on what happens with the Rockies outfield, because right now you have to project, Raimel Tapia out in left field, Charlie Blackmon in right field, some type of platoon perhaps between Sam Hilliard and Garrett Hampson. One's a righty, one's a lefty. And then Ian Desmond could possibly be that 5th outfielder for you. So remains to be seen what will happen with Jonathan Dazza, if he'll make that opening day roster. Is it better for him to go down in AAA to get a little bit more seasoning to get ready for the big leagues? Obviously, we didn't see him at all in 2020. He was at the alternate site, but didn't really get to see any, live in-game action you would have liked to have seen with there being no minor leagues. So, bit of a challenging time. One of the topics that we're hoping to get into today with MLB players versus the league itself and health and safety protocols, if we get into it, are some of the details. And one of the things that has been hammered out is the idea that there's only going to be about 75 players at camp this year down in Scottsdale. So there's going to be a limitation. So essentially anybody that is, Double-A or lower, we're not going to see those guys until the Rockies shove off to start their season. So it's going to be a bit of a staggered start for the minor leagues this year. You're going to have, I believe AAA is going to start at its normal time a week after the start of the regular season. For MLB, it maybe is 2 weeks after. They've yet to release the AAA schedule just yet. MLB did officially announce that all 120 contracts have been, signed by the minor league team. So there's now 120. Every team has 4 minor league squads: low A, high A, Double-A, and AAA. But ultimately, what we're going to see in spring training is about 75 guys coming to camp. So it's going to be big leagues and it's going to be AAA. Once those guys move on, then you're going to see Double-A and below. Those guys will now get their spring training. And so really for the entirety of minor leagues, you're going to see those start up about May 1st, beginning of May. And again, those schedules have yet to come out as well. Some of the partner leagues have announced their schedules, but nevertheless, we'll kind of a wait and see approach right now with everything that's going on with the Rockies roster, if they're going to add anybody else, if they're going to pick up anybody that does get cut. There is that potential. We saw it last year with Matt Kemp, who was dealt to Miami, didn't really work out there. He was cut, and for a 60-game season, he was all right. The Rockies were able to utilize him as their DH, and had a better first month of the season than second month, but was definitely a big part of why they were 11-3 to start the season. And so you certainly could see something like that happen again with the Rockies, maybe picking up a guy who's tossed by the wayside, especially, when depth is a factor. Hunter yesterday from MLB Network, Hunter Reiser, did mention the fact that, pitchers are going to have a hard time this year in a lot of ways, because only making 10 to 12 starts last year means their arms and their bodies aren't entirely up to what they might normally be in a regular 162 game season. So is that the case for position players as well? Again, that all kind of, remain to be seen here as we get started for spring training pitchers and catchers reporting on Wednesday. And Drew reporting to the podcast now. A couple Drews reporting to the pod.
I was going to say, I think I fixed it just in time. I hope I fixed it. Would appear as though I exist in real time. I'll just say I agree with everything Patrick just said. I'm sure it was brilliant. Smartest guy I know.
And I appreciate that, especially because, I did bring up some old discussions that we had, and why I fervently believe I was right. And you know what? I guess it just took that one last oomph, and you now agree with me. Right. So thank you.
I've come over to your side on whatever it was, until the next time we do this.
You look like you need a Breck brew right about now before we bring our guest in.
I really do. I wish I had one on me. We actually the person who runs this household is on their way to get more Breck brew as we speak. So if you want to be like she is and absolutely be taking care of business, head to the local King Supers or a liquor store. Maybe head on to the DNVR bar for a little bit of socially distanced Breck brew drinking. Either way, whether you're grabbing that Avalanche Amber, the Mile High City Copper Lager, the Vanilla Porter, which you can now find all kinds of fun recipes for the Vanillatine's Day there if you go and follow Breck Brew on all their social media stuff at breckbrew.com. They got damn good beer. Yeah, I highly recommend you try all of it out. And we know a damn good broadcaster, and we are very excited to get to bring him onto the program now, as we've started to do on a weekly basis, to jump into some of these hot topics of the day. Know him, of course, as the voice of the Rockies on television at AT&T SportsNet, and the host of the Drew Goodman podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Mr. Drew Goodman.
What's happening, fellas? How we doing?
Fantastic. How are you?
I'm good. All things considered, hanging in there.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time, especially, from your car, as we can see here coming in from the road.
Yeah.
So
I'm a rambling man.
That's right.
Car is the best place to listen to not only our podcast, because that's a great spot. I like to listen to podcasts if I'm going out for a run. It's like osmosis. I don't really listen to what's going on in my headphones, but I absorb it eventually. And car's a great spot to listen to the Drew Goodman podcast. This week you had on FP Santangelo, Washington Nationals announcer, and some great stories. It has Tom Brady story.
One of the best names of all time.
One of my favorites. I learned that his name is Frank Paul. I didn't know. I always knew him just as FP. Your podcast taught me a thing or two about what that stood for.
How about that Brady story he told? Is that not a great story?
I like the Barry Bonds story better, believe it or not.
Because that's a good one too.
You do not hear that kind of insight about Barry Bonds. Anyone saying anything remotely nice about him, and that was really insightful about Barry Bonds' character.
So I will tell you a Barry Bonds story right now, kind of a clubhouse story, and that I've never told on my podcast. I don't think I put it in the book. I'm almost positive I didn't put it in the book. But Barry had this reputation. Boy, you can't approach Barry Bonds; he's going to bite your head off. And I've always felt, and I did mention this on the podcast, that he's like a dog in that, how dogs sense fear, right? So if you kind of
Right.
are, going up to him and you're not confident or whatever, and you're worried, is he going to bite my head off? He'll bite your head off. But if you go up to him with some, like a bounce in your step or whatever, like, hey, I don't care that you're Barry Bonds, I'm just going to get an interview or whatever. It usually resulted much better. So this goes back to when Matt Holliday was still a Rocky, and I want to say we were now into the 2008 season, Matt's last with a Rocky, but we were, doing this long. It may have been late in 2007. It doesn't matter. But Matt had become a superstar level player, and he had that unbelievable MVP caliber year in 07. And so we were putting this huge feature together on him, and they were talking about getting different people to talk about what a great player Matt Holliday was. And I said, how about Barry Bonds? Because Barry Bonds was still the best player in baseball. And they said, you think you can do it? And I said, I've always he's been pretty cool with me, and it's not like we're best friends, but I'll give it a shot. I've always had some success with him. So Charlie Felix is a great photographer. I said, Charlie, listen, we're gonna go in the Giants clubhouse, but you hang out on the far side and just pretend you're doing whatever you're doing. I'm gonna go over to Barry, and if I wave you over, come on over. So I go over to him, and we start talking. We just start BSing about various topics, not Matt Holliday, just various stuff. Well, he was in a really loquacious mood that day, and next thing you know, we're talking. I'm not exaggerating. We talked for like 25 minutes, and finally, after about 25 minutes, I said, Barry, listen, I said, we're doing this piece on Matt Holliday. I said, do you mind giving me one like sound bite just on what you think of Holliday from afar? And he said, yeah, no problem. So I waved Charlie over. Charlie comes over, he rolls tape, and I said, Barry, what are your thoughts on Matt Holliday? I've never forgotten this. He went for 2 minutes and 7 seconds. And you guys know, 2 minutes and 7 seconds is like writing War and Peace. And it was, and it was unbelievable. It was like, I have the greatest respect for him. I love watching him play. On and on and on, singing Matt Holliday's praise, but really well thought out, stuff in talking about his swing and talking about, how he's put together all these things, right? I literally did the mic drop after. I didn't want to lie to him and then ask a 2 follow-up. I said, one question, Barry. Thanks, brother. And I slapped him on the shoulder. I said, good luck tonight, and I walked away. And it helped the piece, and this isn't about me, but it just, everybody's experience. I always say this in life, rather than hear what somebody else says about somebody, if you have a personal experience, it may be 180 degrees different than what other people say. And as I said, my interactions with Bonds were fine. So that was a pretty cool one, and it was it was pretty interesting because I didn't think I'd be sitting there talking to him for almost a half hour, as it turned out.
That's fantastic.
And that's precisely kind of going back to that conversation about, who's a Hall of Famer and whatnot. Don't ask the industry insiders, ask the players themselves. And, we think the national media has a certain idea of what they think ball players in Colorado are like. And sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. But to hear it from the guys on the field, hear from the guys that are playing 162, and they've got to worry about their own team, yet they still see what's going on in those other clubhouses and what's going on in the field with those other teams. So yeah, I'm sure that's going on Matt Holliday's sizzle reel. I'm sure he got a VHS tape. He recorded that piece, Drew.
Yeah, listen, Matt obviously Matt was one of those guys too, great historian, a modern historian, if you will, of the game. Really, admired other players and liked to, look at other swings and talk to guys about the game of baseball. And I one of my favorite periods for the Rockies, and I guarantee it was for you guys as well, far be it for me to talk for you, but when Matt was a Rocky for those 2 months a couple of years ago, it just took us back, and Matt's, I've always loved Matt. He's a good guy, and the influence he had on some of those young guys. And he also had a couple of big moments, hit some home runs. and some meaningful home runs. And I thought
Yeah.
that was such a neat couple of months, especially for people who had been around him and covered him back in, the World Series year and as he grew to stardom in a Rockies uniform. I'm glad that he finished those last couple of months in a Rockies uniform.
I'm very glad that he did. I got a couple of opportunities to interview Matt Holliday. It was one of those things. For me, it was a bridge between two different generations. I think, maybe the last time you were on or before, we had talked about how Cargo was kind of the one guy who, when I first arrived to do this professionally, I was like, okay, I've got to get over a little bit of how I felt about him as a fan and this kind of aura he's got, because by that time the rest of these are all young guys. I'm a rookie, Nolan's a rookie, Charlie's been there for a year, whatever, we're all in the same, but then when Matt Holliday comes and rolls around on that team again, I'm that kid in college, watching those teams do the thing, and I had a very similar experience with him, where now he's not unapproachable or thought of it that way, the way Bonds is at all. I don't want to give people that indication, but it was definitely one of those, he knew he was there for his month and a half to do business, and everyone needed a piece of his time because it was such a great story. And I'm someone he's never met before. I'm just a guy, and I did a similar thing where, and he didn't have any time. He was on his way to the next thing. I said, Matt, I will take no more than 60 seconds of your time. I've got one question. I just want to ask you about playing with these kids, man. Just whatever you can give me. I just want to say, I really appreciated watching you back in the day. And he gave me a solid 2 minutes. Like he said, I asked him for one, he gave me two. It was a great answer, and he went on with his day. And so it's just nice when people like that, especially when it goes the other way, when someone who's been built up is, yeah, what a great guy, and then he lives up to that. You go, yeah, he's one of the good ones, man.
Yeah, he was, Matt's great. And, I had him on the podcast. Oh, it's during COVID, and he's one of those guys that I'm gonna, definitely have on at least once a year. Bright, articulate guy that.
Oh no, slight freeze. Hopefully we get it back. Oh no.
You got me?
Yeah,
There
we
you
got
are.
Yeah, I was saying, he's back in the family business, back in Stillwater, working with Josh, who's his brother, is the head coach at Oklahoma State, and Matt's two oldest, his two boys are Jackson and Ethan are I think they're both already committed to Oklahoma State, though they're in high school. So the beat goes on. Good genetics, man. Hard to beat good genetics, man.
Right.
Undoubtedly. It's cool hearing, Holliday's post-playing career, because, again, on Drew Goodman podcast, when you're talking with FP, I thought it was really insightful to hear what it was like for him as a guy who, hey, he's known as a big leaguer. He's a handful of years in the major leagues. I remember him as an Expos player, fantastic and memorable name, certainly helps. But, after your playing career, no one hands you anything on a silver platter, and to hear him kind of try to figure things out and what he was going to do next once he was done playing, and how he had to grind it out. No one just gave him the job as Nationals announcer. So it's always interesting to see what these players' lives are like once their career's done, because that's such a small part of it. There's a whole life to be led even beyond that.
Patrick, one of the things I like to do is.
Oh, bummer. Oh no, we're timing out again.
I think he was telling me it was just an amazing question.
I think that was it. Oh no, we may have lost him for a moment, but yeah, no, I think that definitely what he was going to go on. Fantastic question, one of the best questions he's ever heard. Now somehow you're muted though, so we can't hear you. Can you? I bet Patrick can figure out a way to unmute you. It's been a fun technology day here on the show. It's been. I was having it earlier.
For some reason, it says mic isn't connected, which you're using your phone, so it's built in.
Yeah. Oh,
this is why you want to join us live, because this will of course be edited out of the podcast.
Of course.
But tune in now. You hear some, MFs, some, choice language here and there. But it's going to get cut out of the pod. But here is the only place that it's going to exist live.
Well, he got rid of the mute for a minute and then it came back on. So I don't know. Maybe if Drew, if you just try going out of the room and coming back in, or there, something you're doing is making it go away and come back. But this is fantastic. Fantastic podcasting. I may have to actually edit this. Darn it.
Just a little bit. Yeah, but we got Matt Holliday coaching at. I thought he was at Oklahoma, but apparently it sounds like he's at Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
We got Tulowitzki down at the University of Texas. That was one of the biggest things I was so disappointed at when I moved to Colorado. And I go, you know what? We got the Rockies. Okay, great. We got the Sky Sox. Okay, great. But again, I'm living near Denver. There's a lot of really fantastic colleges. I'm living near a major metropolis with all these colleges that are around. Oh my gosh, now I can get into college baseball. Ooh, CU Boulder, they're in the Pac-12. All those guys from UCLA. Wait, what? They don't have a baseball team? You got to be kidding me. All right, well, maybe CSU. I can go to some of those Mountain West games. No, CSU doesn't have a baseball team. So that's one of the disappointing things about the state of Colorado is not having all those top Division I programs. I know MSU Online, the Roadrunners, they've got a good Division I club, and they bring in some good talent. Regis University, but it's nice to see that Holliday and Tulo and all those guys are their baseball life is far from over, and certainly wouldn't expect that it would be.
And you've got 2 days left, by the way, Patrick, to take advantage of that, waiving the application fee at MSU Denver Online. Since you mentioned it,
48 hours, huh?
Check it out. Ooh. Yeah, it's lasting through Valentine's Day, the day of love. Apply for free. I highly, highly recommend it. Again, whether you're starting a new degree or finishing up an old one, you just want to get a new skill underneath your belt, head to msudenver.edu/online. Check them out. All kinds of great classes. I think we got Drew Goodman back. We're going to see if this works. There he is.
Yeah. I have to tell you guys, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah,
you guys can hear me okay? Well, here's the thing. We all hate spam calls. And since I'm normally, when I join you guys, I'm on my computer, but because I'm in my car, I'm on my phone, and I get a spam call. We hate spam calls, and that interrupted my, my interactions with you. Real quick, because I heard you guys your last bit, but I'll finish. We're talking about FP Santangelo, who's my guest on the cast this week, and FP. I like doing that where I introduce, people that are, our fan base, our region may not be as familiar with, Mark Granon, who former big leaguer, actually a Rocky for a minute, longtime great analyst for the San Diego Padres on television. Gonna have Mike Krukow coming up. I've had Chip Carey, had Brian Anderson. And it's fun to get to know some of the other, whether they be broadcasters who are former. I think it's kind of neat because there's a lot of great personalities out there. From the college standpoint, it is disappointing that Colorado and Colorado State no longer play baseball. We have a state when it comes to amateur baseball. It's grown in talent so much. I'm biased. I have 3 boys who play, and one's done playing in college, one's playing currently in college, and one's a senior in high school. But a lot of good players, and the D2 options in the RMAC are good. I know you mentioned, Ryan Strang's program at over at Metro State and naturally UNC and Air Force, the only D1 schools. But Chris Hanks over in Grand Junction at Mesa, that is a Division I program masquerading as a D2. They're one of the top 3 or 4 programs in D2 in the country. They do a marvelous job. Dave Hadjic, who used to be with the Rockies, doing wonderful things at Colorado Springs, CU Colorado Springs. Pueblo has a new coaching staff, really dynamic staff. So there are good options inside the state, but I'm with you. It's disappointing that, Colorado's not playing in the Pac-12 and Colorado State's not playing in the Mountain West.
Yeah, as you said, there's a summer collegiate baseball scene too that your sons have even played in. Rocky Mountain Collegiate League, Mile High Collegiate Baseball. So, and those aren't just Colorado products. You have kids coming from all over the place. Up here in Boulder, the Collegians have had kids from Long Beach State, Division I programs, all over the country. Actually, Stephen Piscotty's younger brother, who was drafted, play with the Collegians. So yeah, it might not be Division I, but hey, we know that not all major league ball players come out of the Division I ranks. There are guys who are grinding it out. We see it with Dugan, who we hope to have on as a guest, a recent signing by the Rockies. Josh Fuentes came from an NAIA school, so that is one of the beautiful things about baseball. Unlike some of the other major sports, is you can come out of just about anywhere. If you've got a glove and are willing to travel, you can play ball just about anywhere and keep your career alive.
Yeah, a lot of kids sometimes, everybody's hell-bound on a state or SoCal, and what I try to pass along. I'm involved with a recruiting service, and I try to pass along to people that like high-level D3 baseball, NAI baseball, junior college baseball is really top flight. And on the given day, if you're the right pitcher on the mound, you'll go and beat some major college program in your D3. Now that doesn't work that way in football or basketball, because you have it literal. Baseball is a completely different sport in that regard. So
yeah,
good stuff to keep in mind.
And there's going to be a lot of it out there to go and watch. Before we move into the final topic of the day, just all these rule changes, the CBA, all these things we were talking about, just because Patrick had mentioned with FP Santangelo and on the Drew Goodman podcast, this conversation about kind of finding that life after baseball. And you've witnessed some favorite Rockies players up close and personal make that transition. We get asked about them all. Just to see the transition that Ryan Spilborghs and Corey Sullivan have made from these indelible members of this loved team to these guys who are really doing fantastic work on the broadcast now and have made themselves, into these new versions of themselves. What has it been like? And I know Huey too. I don't want to leave him out of the conversation. We know he's a ball player as well, but with it just being more recent, with you literally like being there, calling these guys in their big moments on the field, and watching that step-by-step transition to what they're doing now.
Let me tell you the key for all those guys, Jeff Hughes included, and I never got to call any of Huey's games when he played, but he was in the big leagues for 12 years, so he had a wonderful career, and obviously Spilly did, and Corey as well. But the one common denominator, those guys did everything in their within their abilities to get the most out of what they had, and that's why they were big leaguers for an extended period of time. None of them were, first round picks. Jeff Houston wasn't a walk on at Wyoming, but he walked on at junior college and then Wyoming, but he was an undrafted free agent. Spilly and Corey both were, after the 5th round. I think they were, 7th and 8th round or 8th and 9th round draft picks, which are, as you guys well know, far from a guarantee that you're going to get to the big leagues. But the common denominator I was alluding to is that same work ethic, that same desire, that same thought of, I'm going to put everything forward within my control to be the best broadcaster. That's what they do now, and the same thing obviously applied to when they were still wearing spikes. So that hasn't changed, and knowing their personality and knowing who those guys were as players, it's not a surprise that they've been so successful now behind the microphone.
And I know people are probably going to Jeff Houston's baseball reference page and are going to be shocked to know, but he was a Rocky about 28 days. For 28 days, he was a member of the Colorado Rockies, was signed as a minor league free agent. And
he was their first something, right?
He was their first Rule 5 pick. Yeah, so
That's
he
right.
signed basically like a minor league deal, and then the Mariners plucked him out, and then he was done. So 28 days in an off season with the Rockies. He's a Rocky. He's a Rocky.
Counts.
It counts. No games, but it counts.
I remember. Yeah, I remember watching. Yeah, I remember watching him play, particularly Texas, and the interesting thing for me is that you recall watching him, and then when I was brought in to do a kind of a trial run through with him, I didn't realize he lived in Denver until I heard the whole backstory that he'd gone to Wyoming, he married a Wyoming girl, and they had long ago settled in Denver as their home. So he's an adopted Coloradan, and he's one of my favorite people in the world. I'm really fortunate to work with not only really talented people, but really good people and many behind the scenes as well.
He was great.
Hey, listen, fellas, I got to jump. Patrick, I told you, I got to run. I got to cut it short a little bit this week. I apologize, but I look forward to jumping on next week, and you guys continue doing the great work. And now we're going to actually have legitimate baseball stuff to talk about coming up with camps opening next week.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate the time. We'll catch up with you for sure. Take care. Be well.
Thank you, Goody. Have a good one.
All right, guys. See you guys. Okay.
Yeah, it's that time. We actually have real baseball.
I know. It's right around the corner. It doesn't feel real until it happens. It won't feel real. But you got to appreciate a guy who takes the time out of his day to literally talk to you from the seat of his car. So we always appreciate Drew Goodman's time, obviously. Make sure that you're subscribed to the Drew Goodman podcast. You can subscribe to it on whatever you're listening to this podcast to right now. Fantastic guests all the time, getting deep into some topics. In fact, you're going to have to go and listen to it now because a couple of things we were going to maybe touch on with him there didn't quite get to. He does on his own podcast when it comes to some of the new rules and the new baseball. We'll tease that one. His thoughts.
Yes.
Patrick, you give us this tease.
Well, yeah, I'm not going to tell you what he said, but it was an interesting wrinkle of, because again, it's so new, and that's what I love about this industry and working with so many great people like you, Drew. Like you, but so many great people like my partner and everyone else around in the Denver sports media, because we're on the cutting edge of, okay, here's this thing, and immediately, what are your thoughts? And you go, I would have never thought about that, and that's something that might not have realized until September rolls around, and you go, hey, you know what? I wonder with these new baseballs, think about it like this, and that's what Drew Goodman does. Early on in that episode, and it kind of makes you take a step back. It doesn't necessarily say it's a bad thing, but it just puts it in context really nicely. And
you got
there's still so much that to talk about when it comes to these new baseballs, and once we get into that, it'll be fun. But Goody, hit it at the park, no pun intended, with his take on that.
Yeah. Hey, we were talking earlier about some big boys. We talked a little Matt Holliday. We talked a little Barry Bonds. And, okay, Bonds might have a little bit more than just Wagyu beef going on, but I'm sure the Wagyu beef helped. Big, beefy boys eat Wagyu beef, but you don't have to be a big, beefy boy to eat Wagyu beef. I don't know if y'all saw Nighthawk, who, wonderful person, friend of the show, clipped my mistake. I really wish I could go back and find exactly what it was I was trying to say.
You just said the wrong thing. You said butt.
I just said the wrong word. I just said that Wagyu beef is good for your butt. And I stand by that. Until it's scientifically disproven, I'm standing by it.
It's not wrong. It's like, hey, Drew, we gave you the take sign, but you hit a double. So I mean, you erred,
right, totally.
But hey, no harm, no foul. That's what my high school coach used to always say. Hey, no harm, no foul. So it's all right. It's good for your butt.
Right. And Wagyu beef right there at Hassel Cattle Company, HASSELL cattlecompany.com. My challenge remains open. It is damn good beef. When you use promo code DNVR10, you get 10% off. I'm a big fan of the bacon, the steaks, the ground beef, and the ground chuck. But if you're more into sausages, I really like the sausages. I feel like I'm not getting the most out of them because I get very boring. I get plain sausages. So for me, the sausage is great. but I know they've got like a jalapeno cheddar sausage thing going on that I think would be most people's preference there. So definitely check that out. Whatever it is, man. If you're ordering over $200, you get free shipping. If you've got the freezer space, I highly, highly recommend it, especially if you go in looking to just load up on all the little deals. You can get quite a bit of beef. You won't have to go to the grocery store for it in a while. So, or maybe ever again, if you're like me. It's just there's no reason not to. You get hormone-free, better beef. It tastes better. It's better for you. It's better for the animals and the environment. There's no downsides, zero downsides. So head over to hasslecattlecompany.com, check it out. And then, like I said, challenge is open. I, at this point, can pretty much guarantee you will not be disappointed in the quality of the product. You'll be the first. Let me put it that way. You will be the first person who said they were disappointed in their Hassle Cattle Company package.
That person's not listening now, and even if this podcast were to immediately upload, like let's say onto your iPhone or Android, like that U2 album, everyone who then would listen to that podcast, still no one would be able to shoot you down on that. No way. Drew, are you the type of Irish person that if you even eat a tomato, you're like, ooh, that's spicy?
You know what's funny? So I am incredibly Irish, by the way, and I appreciate. So like there's a lot of spicy food that I really like, but there's a lot of I don't. But tomato, I don't know that spice is the problem. Not a big tomato guy.
Oh, geez, all
there's
right.
a lot
So
of, yeah.
Well, that's the joke. Like some people, salsa.
Spicy wings. I guess spicy wing. Give me some spicy wings. I put sriracha on like pizza, and actually Katie's got me now into putting like that Louisiana hot sauce on on fried chicken.
Tabasco.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, on the fried chicken. Yeah.
All right.
So no, but I got weird ED problems.
Yeah, well, you put sriracha on pizza. I mean,
it's fine. Yeah.
That's worse than pineapples, which I don't have a problem with. Well, a lot of people do. If
anyone's listening,
a lot of people do. Are you the kind of guy that orders those weird kind of like, yeah, let me get the slice with the chicken and penne pasta on it thing? You'll do that, won't you?
I try. So I get very anxious. Katie has lived this whole nightmare with me. I get so anxious because I don't like getting special orders. I don't like telling people to bring me stuff special, but I'm a very plain eater.
That's smart. You should not be doing the, hey, can I get this? But could you? Yeah. No, just get what's in it. What's in it is there for a reason.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. So I try to order things that are just already as is on the menu, but that sometimes means I stick to a pretty small selection of things. I eat Wagyu beef from Hassle Cattle Company and fried chicken and pizza. Those are the three things.
You're a high-end picky eater.
I am.
And sushi. And you're like, whoa, what? How can you be picky and like sushi? Well, the Wagyu beef thing, though, does make sense.
At a fancy musicians night out, these musicians were way better than me, and I don't know why they invited me to play with them and hang out with them for this short period of time before they moved out to LA and joined real bands and stuff. But they took us out for a night of actually sushimi and sake, and it was really high end. And my understanding it was good, but I'm just pounding raw fish, trying not to throw up, man, and not be rude. just in there, like I'm hanging on. And I love you guys, and this has been one of the coolest nights of my life, and I don't want it to end with me walking out of here going, it's raw fish.
The only man to ever have sushi and then immediately go to a Burger King drive-thru. Drew Creasman.
We probably did something. I'm totally that person.
I figure we're already off the track, so we might as well. I feel like if we go opposite, it's like the George Costanza on Seinfeld. Let's do the opposite of our instincts. Let's not try to get back on track. And in doing so, we'll actually get back on track, which I think has actually worked because I'm ready to talk baseball again.
Oh, really? We've only got a few minutes left in the show. What's left?
Well, to be fair, 33 minutes is going to be edited out of the 49 minutes. Yeah. So we only have 16 usable minutes right now on this podcast. And I'm cutting mine out. My solo stuff is no.
Yeah, I thought your solo work was fantastic.
I'm getting into the minutia of minor league baseball. And again, I love it. But I don't know how many other people do want to really know about
We're going to make some people love it.
The AA Northeast North Division, because now, I don't know if you saw this, but all of the normal minor league names like Pacific Coast League, as of right now, they don't exist.
Oh,
It's
I did see that.
AAA West.
Will should have been there with me for the wasabi and ginger trick, which I didn't know. So, Will, next time someone offers to take me out for sashimi, I'm taking you with me. But yeah, so I'm of two minds about this. One, all the fun names are gone. On the other hand, this makes sense to, actual people. Because even, I think, hardcore baseball fans, like I've had, I won't out anybody, but I've had people tell me, I was listening to the show, and then you started talking about the PCL and the South Atlantic League and the Pioneer League, and I have no idea what any of that means, and it's just like, and it's like, and this person's going, I'm a pretty well educated baseball person, and I know the minor leagues exist, and there's AAA, AA, kind of the low levels. I understand all this stuff, but I have no idea what the Pioneer League is, and I get that. Like you've got to want it, and to understand what the Pioneer League. So when you see like AAA East, what's that? Well, that's the AAA level for the teams that play in the East. And it would have the teams that you expect in it too. So it's like, it's a little mechanical. It's a little like the robots are taking over and the Matrix is coming to rule us. But I do think it just makes sense to normal people.
Here's the thing that, again, this is like Drew Goodman talking about the new baseballs and starting a conversation. How about this for a conversation starter? Because, again, there's not too many people I get to talk to minor league baseball about. And that's the topic for this moment. So we don't have the Pacific Coast League. We don't have the Eastern League, even though all these leagues exist. And, in fact, they created one brand new league that was being called the Mid-Atlantic League at the time because it exists, well, you guessed it, in the middle of the Atlantic region.
But I was going to say in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean.
Right. But what about this? And this was part of the reason what MLB wanted to do by taking over minor leagues, because before they were just two separate entities that created a union together. Minor league baseball was its own thing. Now it's not. Now there's no capital M minor league baseball. It's just the minors now, essentially, and MLB runs it. But one of the things that they want to do is have national advertising. So now instead of, all of these teams like in Albuquerque going around to the neighborhood to try to drum up all these sponsors and things of that nature, now you could have a mega company like Breck Brew being the official, beer sponsor of all of the minors. And you go, oh, that's great. It's going to be served in all the minor leagues, and Breck pays for it. They get their money's worth, and it works out really nicely. And a lot of that model comes from the G League, which was previously the D League for the developmental league. And then Gatorade got their hands on it and said, hey, let's sponsor it. So my thought is, right now they've got no names. Right now it's just AAA East, AAA West. What if the plan is to get sponsors for all of these leagues? And so now instead of talking about the Pacific Coast League, now we're talking about the Strava Craft Coffee League. And people are even more confused. Good for Strava Craft Coffee. We want them to be the official named sponsor of AAA. Right. But at the same time, now baseball fans are going to have no idea. Strava Craft Coffee League, is that, can I sign up for that? Is it intramural? Is it a softball league? What is that?
Yeah, I wonder if there's a way to, and too many words can be a problem too, right? If you made it like the AAA East by Strava Craft Coffee or something like that, or the AA South by Breck Brew, something like that. But that might be just a bit too much. Yeah, it's funny. Learning what I've learned over the years, I've come to hate the sponsorships less and less. Is that maybe because, they're paying our paychecks and they're the reason we get to exist here? Maybe. And it depends on, your sponsors. It really, I think the kind of company and the values of that company and the quality of that company should matter to you. And so, there was kind of that whole conversation around Ball Aerospace when they, and Ball Arena and people going like, hey, the name is kind of weird, but most people around here really like Ball and they employ a lot of people and they're a really highly rated company. And so there was a talk about that. And so I think, it's all going to depend on them. But I would even be okay with leagues, because ultimately it brings money in, and you want money in minor league baseball. You want minor league players getting paid better. You want them to be able to be in better facilities. You want them eating right. That all costs money. And if it can be paid for by companies that have a vested interest in the community and in making that something that they can be proud of, like you said, if you do it the way we've done here with our, you know, it is kind of funny walking around my house, man, starting the day with the Strava Craft coffee, getting out a couple of Wagyu Hassel cattle beef patties for lunch, you know, using my free Sonicare every morning and night that I got from Green Mountain Dental. But it's like, they're good products, and we like them, and they're local companies. And so if you can do that, yeah, man, go for it, and bring some money these kids' way. There's been some reporting recently about this too, about some of the salaries going up, and that is good. But all that stuff needs to happen more. And if that's the way to do it, I'm all for it.
Yeah, and it's not going to turn fans away. Like if we're talking about the Strava Craft Coffee League, or how about the Strava Craft League instead of the PCL, now it's the SCL. So again, people go, "Oh, I don't like that name." Blah blah blah. Yeah, are you going to an Isotopes game? You damn right you are, and
Yeah.
So am I. Like, we're still
Totally.
covering it. It's just like a little type of minutia for the industry to figure out. It's kind of like how, what wasn't it, the playoffs by Camping World or Doosan, right? You go, what is
Right.
Doosan? Like, that was the weirdest thing in 2018 when, you know, we get to Coors Field and, you know, all the national media is there for that game 3 against the Brewers. Doosan's everywhere. And you go, by the way, what is Doosan? You go, oh, it's a Korean construction company.
Right.
Naturally,
Right.
when you
It's
think of the playoffs.
I guess I'm going to buy a crane. Right.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I did look to see how much a down payment on a tractor was. So maybe it did work to a certain degree.
Oh, man, just have fun with, let's all remember that minor league baseball is supposed to be fun. It's also supposed to be an important development proving grounds for young players, but fun. All the fun things. Hashtag keep minor league baseball fun. And hashtag make Major League Baseball fun.
One is keep, one is made. And
Yeah.
and you know, that's, you know, after not having minor league baseball last year, just having it, I think, is great. So, you know, you can make these little changes here and there with the names, or if you want to go so far and have advertising on the helmets. Okay, or a little small thing on the batting practice jersey. Anything that's going to bring more money in the game, that's going to, again, filter down to the quality of lifestyle for the players, is going to be great. And, you know, one thing that we've seen in the Pioneer League, which is now just a partner league, it's professional, but it's not in the minors. It's not affiliated with the Rockies at all in any way, is that they're going to 6-game series. So now I believe Monday is essentially a travel day. And so now they get to travel. They don't have to worry about getting on a bus at 1 a.m. in the morning, going somewhere else and playing a night game after sitting on a bus for 8 hours. It is. And so, yeah, you go, oh, man, you mean for a whole week you're going to see the same team? Yeah, for a whole week you get professional baseball. Yeah. For a whole week. It happens to be the same one.
Yeah.
You know, the jerseys are still going to change. They'll jazz it up, whatever it is, but you get baseball. And I think, you know, for better or worse, that's one of the things about the pandemic that's forced us to do, is kind of be a little bit more grateful, be a little bit more thankful for the things that we have. And yeah, we may want things to go back to the previous, you know, way of being. But, you know, for not having it at all and knowing what it's like to have nothing, sure, sign me up for a 6-game series in order for the players to have, you know, a better life and better facilities to play and train at.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm ready to embrace this new world. This is something we're going to jump into much more deeply, hopefully as soon as next week. But we're definitely going to be diving into everything that's going on in the minor league world and having some fun with it. We do have more thoughts on, you know, the players versus owners and the CBA and new rules, all that stuff. We didn't totally get into it. Some technical difficulties here today, and I didn't want to truncate and shorten and cheapen those conversations. We really want to dive into those. So be on the lookout for that some point next week for sure. And when we have Drew Goodman back on, we'll get his thoughts on those things as well. You're definitely going to want to hear all of that. So we appreciate you all sticking through it with this one. I know it was a little bit of a tougher episode. We appreciate you all so very, very much for being there, hanging out with us on social media, at Drew Creasman, at Patrick D. Lyons, at DNVR_Rockies, for subscribing to the DNVR.com, where you get all that written content, plus you get discounts on hats, shirts, masks, a bigger beer when you come down to the DNVR bar, and you get to hang out with us in our private chat room in the Discord, talking about all kinds of stuff, literally anything you can think of. We're in there hanging out. You get to chat with us or anybody else in the community for that matter. Actually, chatting with us is that's okay. That's a bonus or whatever. It's the other. You guys run the conversation. You're absolutely fantastic. And we really appreciate you all out there. Keep being absolutely awesome. I promise you that we will keep being absolutely Patrick Lyons and Drew Creasman. And until next time, we will see you at the ballpark.